In the sprawling, heavily fortified archives of the Imperium, data is protected by adamantium vault doors, biometric scanners, and layers of lethally encrypted Binharic code. The Inquisition believes that their most critical military secrets are entirely safe. They are catastrophically mistaken. They view the human brain merely as the biological engine of a loyal servant. But in the lightless depths of the halo stars, a far more ancient predatory intelligence views the human mind for what it truly is: an unencrypted, highly portable, and incredibly valuable hard drive. Today, we dissect the ultimate cosmic syndicate. We analyze the Slaugth not as mindless, starving monsters, but as the supreme data brokers of the grim darkness, participating in an illicit galactic economy where the ultimate currency is stolen memories. The greatest, most fatal misconception perpetuated by the Ordo Xenos is the fundamental biological classification of the Slaugth. Imperial field manuals describe them as carrion lords, hideous, writhing masses of necrotic worms that emerge from the dark simply to feast on the dead and dying. This is a tragically primitive, purely biological interpretation of a vastly superior intellect. The Slaugth do not consume human brain matter to satisfy a basic metabolic hunger. They are not animals hunting for calories. They are a highly sophisticated, completely amoral cartel of information brokers. To them, the physical grey matter of a human being is entirely worthless. It is merely the organic casing that houses the true treasure. They eat the brain because it is the only way to physically download the data. Consider the sheer, staggering density of information contained within the mind of a high-ranking imperial official. A planetary governor, a Lord General of the Militarum, or a senior Magos of the Mechanicus does not merely carry tactical knowledge. They are walking, breathing repositories of absolute geopolitical power. Their neural pathways contain planetary defense grid frequencies, the precise deployment schedules of void fleets, the access codes to orbital lance batteries, and the deeply buried, embarrassing secrets of rival aristocratic houses. The Imperium spends billions of thrones building colossal, heavily warded cogitator banks to store this data, entirely blind to the fact that the most vulnerable storage device in the room is the wet, biological computer sitting inside the governor's skull. When the Slaugth initiate a harvest, they are executing a flawless, untraceable cyber heist. Their method of consumption is not digestion, it is a rapid, hyper-advanced process of psychic and biological data extraction. As their necrotic, worm-like appendages bore into the cranium of their victim, they are not simply destroying the tissue. They are meticulously absorbing the victim's synaptic pathways, downloading every memory, every password, and every intimate thought directly into their own collective, invertebrate consciousness. The victim's entire lifetime of experience, training, and classified knowledge is perfectly ripped from their biological hard drive and seamlessly assimilated into the Slauth's network. The terrifying efficiency of this method completely bypasses every physical and digital security measure the Imperium has ever devised. If a rebel faction wishes to steal the planetary defense codes, they must breach the palace walls, slaughter the Praetorian Guard, hack the primary logic engines, and evade the alarms, a process that guarantees an overwhelming military response. But the Slaugth bypass the vault entirely. They simply wait for the Lord Commander to sleep, bypass his personal bodyguard with their unnatural, phase-shifting biology, and quietly consume his mind in the dark. By the time the sun rises and the headless corpse is discovered, the codes have not merely been copied, they have been completely physically removed from the location, encrypted within the biology of a creature that is already light years away. This brings us to the terrifying reality of the Slaugth's true purpose. They do not hoard this stolen knowledge for the sake of mere curiosity. They are the supreme capitalists of the galactic underworld. In the lawless, uncharted territories of the Halo stars, far beyond the reach of the Astronomicon, there exists a shadow economy that operates entirely on leverage, blackmail, and tactical advantage. In this black market, gold, promethium, and imperial thrones are practically worthless. The true, absolute cosmic currency is actionable intelligence. The Slaugth are the undisputed central bank of this terrifying economy. They possess the operational capability to completely dismantle a subsector without ever firing a macro cannon, simply by selling the right sequence of access codes to the wrong pirate armada. The Imperium of Man believes it is fighting a war of territorial dominance and ideological purity. They deploy trillions of guardsmen to hold physical lines drawn in the mud. But the Slaugth are playing an entirely different, vastly more sophisticated game. They view the entire galaxy as a sprawling, poorly secured data farm. Every brutal planetary siege, every Inquisition purge, and every chaotic uprising is merely a distraction. A loud, bloody smokescreen that allows them to slip quietly into the vaults and extract the real wealth. They are the ultimate hackers of the biological world, turning the Imperium's most heavily guarded secrets into highly liquid, easily tradable cosmic currency. To comprehend the intricacies of this biological black market, one must first understand how the Slaugth categorize and value human cognition. They are not mindless gluttons consuming everything in their path. They are meticulous auditors of the human experience. When a Slaugth assimilates a human mind, it aggressively filters the data, discarding the emotional and the sentimental. A lifetime of a victim's love, happiness, or spiritual devotion to the Emperor is instantly classified as worthless biological spam, deleted and flushed away. What the Syndicate isolates, preserves, and categorizes is the raw, actionable leverage. Passwords, biometric bypass protocols, classified patrol routes, and the deeply repressed hypocrisies of imperial officials are meticulously extracted and transformed into pristine, tradable assets. Within this shadow economy, there exists a rigid, terrifying hierarchy of data. The memories of a standard Imperial Guardsman, the layout of a single trench line, or the operational status of a lasgun battery are the equivalent of loose copper coins traded in bulk to low-level pirates or minor chaos cults. However, the ingested memories of a navigator, the genetically engineered mutants capable of seeing the warp routes, are the equivalent of solid gold, offering safe passage through impossible storms. And at the absolute pinnacle of this dark economy lies the mind of an inquisitor. To consume an inquisitor is to acquire a masterpiece of paranoia, a treasure trove of blackmail, kill switch codes, and systemic weaknesses that can entirely paralyze a planetary government. The physical manifestation of this commerce is a grotesque mockery of imperial bureaucracy. The Slaugth do not trade in digital data slates or encrypted Vox transmissions, which can be intercepted or decoded by the Adeptus Mechanicus. They trade in concentrated biological memory engrams. These are localized clusters of necrotic tissue, perfectly preserved and chemically stabilized, containing the specific isolated memories of the victim. A buyer in the Halo stars, whether it be a Drukhari Archon seeking the defense grid of a pleasure world, or a radical, desperate planetary governor willing to deal with Xenos to crush a rival house, purchases these engrams. The intelligence is perfectly pure, completely untraceable, and biologically authenticated. The sheer sociopathy of these transactions is what elevates the Slaugth from mere monsters to cosmic apex predators. They harbor no ideological hatred for the Imperium, no religious fanaticism, and no desire for galactic conquest. They view the entire sprawling billion-soul empire of humanity not as an enemy to be destroyed, but as an incredibly lucrative, self-replenishing data farm. The constant, unending warfare of the 41st millennium is merely the perfect distraction that keeps the security guards busy, while the Slaugth quietly empty the vaults. They approach the absolute horror of the grim darkness with the cold, detached boredom of a corporate accountant balancing a highly profitable ledger. This creates a terrifying geopolitical reality for the High Lords of Terror. The Imperium expends unimaginable resources building adamantium fortresses, raising void shields, and deploying billions of troops to hold physical borders against the Orcs and the Tyranids. They operate under the assumption that their structural integrity is sound as long as the walls hold. But conceptually, the Imperium is a violently leaking sieve. Their most heavily guarded military doctrines and darkest political secrets are constantly bleeding out into the galactic underworld, carried away in the bellies of creatures that slipped through the cracks. The fortress is physically impenetrable, but biologically, the front door has been left wide open. The ultimate tragedy is that the Imperium's own rigid, oppressive architecture makes it the perfect target for this specific type of exploitation. In a society where information is violently restricted, where knowledge is compartmentalized under pain of death, a single secret becomes infinitely valuable. By enforcing absolute, suffocating ignorance upon the masses, the Inquisition has artificially hyperinflated the value of classified intelligence. The Slaugth are simply capitalizing on the market conditions the Imperium itself created. They are harvesting the fruits of an empire that has mathematically guaranteed its own exploitation by making the truth its most heavily guarded and therefore its most profitable commodity. The most devastating aspect of the Slaugth's operation is that they do not merely sell the data they steal, they strategically invest it. They are the invisible hand of the galactic market, utilizing stolen memories to manipulate the macro structures of imperial society. The Syndicate understands that a direct military confrontation with the Adeptus Astartes or the Imperial Navy is inefficient and bad for business. Instead, they use the stolen intelligence to engineer highly profitable, localized apocalypses. By carefully injecting the right secret into the right ear, they can plunge a stable, tithe-producing world into a catastrophic civil war without ever deploying a single warship. Consider the anatomy of a Slaugth-engineered planetary collapse. The Syndicate consumes the mind of a high-ranking cleric, discovering concrete evidence of profound systemic heresy within a rival aristocratic house. They do not blackmail the house. That is a short-term, low-yield strategy. Instead, they anonymously leak this flawless, undeniable data to the local Adeptus Arbites or a passing inquisitorial retinue. The resulting purge is instantaneous and violently catastrophic. The planetary defense forces fracture, cities burn, and the population is slaughtered. The Imperium believes it has successfully excised a chaotic tumor. In reality, they have just performed a massive, unpaid harvest operation for the Slaugth, creating thousands of fresh corpses and newly vulnerable minds perfectly primed for extraction amidst the chaos. To facilitate this grand manipulation, the Slaugth employ a method of infiltration that borders on the incomprehensible. Through their front organization, the Amaranthine Syndicate, they do not merely steal the memories, they utilize them to pilot the victim's physical biology. When a key political figure is consumed, the Slaugth do not leave the body behind. They hollow out the organic shell and fill it with their own writhing invertebrate mass, perfectly assuming the physical form, the vocal cadence, and the exact mannerisms of the deceased. Because they possess every single memory, every password, and every intimate behavioral quirk of the victim, they can seamlessly resume the victim's life. They bypass genetic locks and psychic wards because the biological keys are technically, horrifyingly, correct. The psychological terror this inflicts upon the human condition is absolute. A Lord General may be executing a flawless defensive campaign, entirely unaware that the trusted strategic advisor standing next to him is dead. He looks into his friend's eyes, he hears his friend's voice, and they reminisce about shared battles from decades past. But the advisor is merely a biological meat puppet, a complex, rotting submarine piloted by a collective of alien worms, reading lines from a stolen script. The Slaugth weaponize human trust and camaraderie, transforming the most intimate bonds of the Imperial command structure into deeply compromised, lethal liabilities. You cannot trust your commanders, you cannot trust your family, and if there is a gap in your own memory, you cannot even trust yourself. This methodology perfectly exploits the greatest vulnerability of the Imperium, its institutionalized, suffocating paranoia. The Inquisition is designed to hunt heretics and demons, threats that leave a metaphysical footprint, threats that scream and burn. They are fundamentally unequipped to hunt an enemy that perfectly obeys the law, recites the prayers flawlessly, and operates entirely within the boundaries of imperial bureaucracy. The Slaugth play the rigid, dogmatic systems of the Imperium like a well-tuned instrument. They use the Inquisition's own fear of the unseen to misdirect their fury, ensuring the Imperial war machine is always looking in the wrong direction, while the Syndicate quietly dismantles the infrastructure from the inside. The final crushing realization of the Slaughth's existence is that they represent a threat the Imperium is entirely incapable of defeating, because they cannot even comprehend the nature of the war. The High Lords of Terror believe they are fighting for the survival of the human species, but the Slaugth view the Imperium not as an opponent, but as a fully manageable, highly lucrative cattle farm. They prune the herd when it grows too large. They engineer conflicts to harvest the sick and the weak, and they carefully manage the ecosystem to ensure a perpetual yield of high-value data. The Imperium is not losing a war of attrition. It is being actively, efficiently farmed. To grasp the true staggering scale of the Slaughth's operation, one must examine the clientele of this biological black market. The Syndicate does not peddle their stolen memory engrams to street-level hive-gangers or petty smugglers. Their prices are astronomically high, payable only in advanced Xenos technology, rare isotopes, or entire unmapped star systems. Their primary customers are the apex predators of the galaxy. A Chaos warband preparing to break a heavily fortified Cadian gate will trade priceless Dark Age archaeotech to the Slaugth simply to acquire the exact biometric bypass memories of the gate's supreme commander. A Drukhari Archon seeking a flawless raid will purchase the patrol routes of the Imperial Navy directly from the digested mind of a fleet admiral. The Slaugth do not take sides in the galactic war. They merely sell the ammunition to whoever can afford the premium. This creates a terrifying dynamic that can only be described as the inflation of secrets. As the Imperium of Man slowly rots and its borders collapse, the desperation of its commanders grows. To survive, they enact increasingly complex security protocols and bury their secrets under deeper layers of encryption. But in the Slaughth's economy, this merely artificially drives up the value of the asset. The harder the Imperium tries to hide a piece of data, the more lucrative it becomes on the black market. The Inquisition's absolute obsession with secrecy, their willingness to burn entire worlds to keep a single truth hidden, perfectly serves the Slaughth's business model. The Imperium is unknowingly acting as a central bank, continuously printing a currency that only the Slaugth know how to physically extract and spend. Furthermore, the Syndicate acts as the supreme, unfeeling regulator of galactic conflict. They understand that a total victory by any single faction, be it the Imperium, Chaos, or the Tyranids, would effectively end their highly profitable data farming operation. If humanity is entirely wiped out, the bank goes bankrupt. Therefore, the Slaugth utilize their stolen intelligence to maintain a perpetual, agonizing stalemate. If a Chaos invasion is proceeding too successfully and threatens to consume a highly lucrative sector, the Slaugth will quietly sell the tactical weaknesses of the Chaos warlord back to the Imperial Inquisition. They do not do this out of mercy or loyalty. They do it simply to ensure the meat grinder keeps turning, guaranteeing a continuous, never-ending supply of fresh trauma, new secrets, and highly valuable cognitive data. The technological superiority of the Slauth's data storage makes the Imperium's archives look like the scribblings of desperate children. The Adeptus Mechanicus relies on failing 10,000-year-old logic engines, desperately preying over rusting hard drives that slowly corrupt their own data over millennia. In stark contrast, the Slauth's biological network is flawless, immortal, and constantly updating. When a Slaugth consumes a memory, it is perfectly preserved in a chemical state of absolute clarity, completely immune to digital decay or scrap code viruses. They are the true, unacknowledged archivists of the 41st millennium. They possess the lost STC blueprints, the forgotten histories of the Horus heresy, and the true names of ancient demons, all perfectly catalogued within their writhing, invertebrate biology. This trade operates with a chilling metaphysical safety that deeply confounds the Imperium. When humans deal with the warp, they invite corruption, mutation, and the attention of dark gods. But the Slaugth deal entirely in cold, hard, material data. They leave no chaotic taint. Their psychic footprint does not scream with the emotional fire of demons. Instead, it registers to an astropath as cold, dead static, the chilling, unreadable white noise of a completely alien, invertebrate mind. A grey knight or a sanctioned astropath trained to hunt the burning flames of heresy will often walk straight past a Slaugth infiltration cell because they are completely blind to the freezing void of the Xenos' presence. They are a purely physical, purely capitalistic horror, rendering the Imperium's primary methods of metaphysical detection lethally inadequate. The ultimate irony of this cosmic economy is the monetization of the Imperial war effort itself. A Lord Militant may sacrifice 3 million guardsmen in a grueling, decade-long trench war to secure a vital promethium refinery, believing he has secured a grand victory for the God Emperor. But before the blood on the ground has even dried, the Slaugth have already consumed his chief logistician and sold the refinery's optimal orbital bombardment coordinates to an Orc freebooter armada. The staggering, heroic sacrifices of humanity are not grand tragedies. In the ledger of the Amaranthine Syndicate, they are merely the initial operational costs required to generate a highly profitable data point. To truly understand the horror of the Slaugth, one must move beyond the geopolitical and look at the intimately philosophical, the absolute, irreversible theft of the self. In the brutal reality of Warhammer 40k, death is cheap. An Imperial citizen expects to die violently, either on a factory floor or a battlefield. But the foundational comfort of the human condition is that one's experiences, one's identity, belong entirely to the individual. When you die, your secrets, your loves, and your traumas die with you. The Slaugth fundamentally violate this sacred biological absolute. They do not merely kill you, they plagiarize your existence. They reduce the entirety of a human soul into a highly compressed, tradable file, completely separating your identity from your humanity. Consider the psychological terror of the living echo. When the Slaugth assume the physical form of a consumed victim, they do not merely mimic them. They perfectly experience the victim's memories. If they consume a devoted husband, the worm colony perfectly remembers the smell of his wife's hair, the exact emotional weight of his wedding vows, and the protective love he felt for his children. But they process these profound, beautiful human emotions with the cold, dead detachment of a machine reading a line of code. They can perfectly replicate a tearful reunion or a passionate embrace, utilizing the victim's own deeply cherished memories as a biological script to maintain the infiltration. They wear human love like a camouflage suit, entirely devoid of the capacity to actually feel it. This represents a terrifying violation of the afterlife. In the imperial cult, a loyal soul is promised a return to the Emperor's light. But if your memories, your defining traumas, and your greatest triumphs are physically extracted and traded on the black market, what exactly is left to ascend? Your first kiss, your proudest victory, and your deepest shames are no longer your own. They are locked inside a glass vial in the halo stars, sold to a dark Eldar Archon who wishes to experience the taste of human pride like a fine wine. The Slaugth do not just steal the future, they steal the past, entirely erasing the victim's ownership over their own life story. The strategic paralysis this mechanism inflicts upon the imperial hierarchy is devastating. The Inquisition relies heavily on physical torture and psychic interrogation to extract the truth from heretics and traitors. But how do you interrogate an entity that can simply rewrite its own biological hard drive? If an Inquisitor captures a suspected Slaugth infiltrator wearing the skin of a planetary governor, the entity can seamlessly feed the interrogator the genuine, flawless memories of the innocent governor. The truth itself becomes completely malleable, a digital construct that the Syndicate can edit in real time. The Inquisition's most brutal tools are rendered entirely impotent against an enemy that treats human consciousness as an editable text document. This leads to the implementation of the Data Corruption Protocol. The Slaugth are not limited to merely reading the data. They possess the theoretical capacity to alter it before passing it on. If they wear a commander's skin, they can subtly rewrite his deeply held tactical beliefs or his loyalty to specific allies, fundamentally changing his personality at the biological level without anyone noticing. They are the ultimate gaslighters of the cosmos. They can take a staunch loyalist and, by carefully editing his internalized memories of the Emperor's light, slowly transform him into a paranoid, self-destructive liability, entirely convinced that his new, treacherous thoughts are his own original ideas. The terminal realization of the black market of memories is the absolute devaluation of human life. A human being is, fundamentally, nothing more than a complex collection of memories and experiences. If those memories can be extracted, quantified, priced, and traded on a galactic exchange, then human life possesses absolutely no intrinsic spiritual value. We are not the Emperor's chosen children, nor are we the grand protagonists of the galaxy. In the cold, unblinking eyes of the Slaugth, humanity is simply a massive, unsecured biological crypto wallet waiting in the dark to be quietly, efficiently hacked. To recognize the true, unassailable power of the Amaranthine Syndicate is to accept that the Imperium of Man is fundamentally, irreversibly insolvent in the cosmic economy. While the Syndicate anchors its horrific operations within the lightless fringes of the Halo stars and the Calixis sector, their network of stolen mines is a silent cancer spreading deep toward the Segmentum Solar. The High Lords of Terra operate under the antiquated delusion that galactic supremacy is determined by the size of a void fleet or the thickness of adamantium armor. They are fighting a purely physical war of attrition against the Orcs, the Tyranids, and the forces of chaos. But the Slaugth have entirely bypassed the physical battlefield. They understand that in a galaxy drowning in endless, meaningless violence, physical territory changes hands daily and is therefore worthless. The only permanent appreciating asset is knowledge. The Imperium is proudly defending its physical borders, entirely oblivious to the fact that its intellectual and cognitive capital has already been thoroughly, systematically liquidated. The futility of Imperial defense against this specific threat is mathematically absolute. The Adeptus Custodes can guard the Imperial Palace against a demonic incursion, and the Imperial Fists can fortify a star system against a Black Crusade. But how do you fortify a biological mind against a predator that does not trigger alarms, leaves no warp signature, and bypasses every biometric lock because it is physically wearing the correct fingerprints? The Imperium's entire security apparatus relies on identifying the other, the mutant, the witch, the alien. But the Slaugth do not invade as the other. They invade as the trusted confidant, the loyal wife, the veteran commander. They weaponize the very concept of familiarity, transforming the Imperium's deeply ingrained xenophobia into a massive, blinding vulnerability. The walls of the fortress are flawlessly intact, but the architect has already sold the blueprints to the enemy. Consider the terrifying geopolitical concept of the archival end state. The Slaugth possess absolutely no desire to conquer Terra, extinguish the Emperor's light, or eradicate the human species. Such an apocalyptic victory would be a catastrophic business failure, as it would destroy their primary source of revenue. Instead, their ultimate goal is perfect, invisible management. They wish to maintain the Imperium in a state of perpetual, agonizing equilibrium, strong enough to continually generate complex tactical data, paranoid secrets, and valuable technological innovations, yet weak enough to remain utterly incapable of securing its own biological vaults. The Slaugth do not want to end the nightmare of the 41st millennium. They want to perfectly regulate it, ensuring the cosmic meat grinder never stops producing fresh, highly valuable cognitive data. If the High Lords of Terra were ever capable of comprehending the true scale of this biological espionage, the resulting psychological collapse would instantly paralyze the Imperial war machine. To realize that your most brilliant strategic maneuvers, your deepest inquisitorial purges, and your most desperate sacrifices are not dictating the fate of the galaxy, but are simply generating market fluctuations for an invertebrate cartel, is a truth too heavy for the human mind to bear. The grand, sweeping narrative of human survival, the heroism of the Space Marines, the martyrdom of the saints, is reduced to nothing more than localized agricultural data. The commanders believe they are playing a grand game of geopolitical chess, completely unaware that the Slaugth own the board, manufactured the pieces, and are actively selling the broadcast rights to the spectators in the dark. The terminal indignity of this reality falls upon the individual citizen. In a universe entirely devoid of hope, the only remaining comfort is the sanctity of one's own mind. Even if you are tortured by the Inquisition or slaughtered by Xenos, your thoughts, your final prayers, and the quiet memory of the people you loved are supposedly yours alone, destined to fade into the quiet dark. The Slaugth steal this final microscopic mercy. They drag your deepest traumas and your most cherished loves out into the cold light of the galactic black market, slapping a price tag on the very essence of your soul. You are denied the dignity of a true death. Instead, your identity is infinitely duplicated, traded, and consumed by alien aristocrats who wear your memories like cheap jewelry. The black market of memories is the ultimate expression of cosmic nihilism in Warhammer 40k. It is the chilling realization that humanity is not a protagonist fighting a tragic war for survival. The Imperium of Man is simply a colossal, heavily militarized, and completely unsecured server farm, Billions of human beings are born, suffer and die every single day, not to hold the line against the dark, but simply to generate the raw data required to keep the shadow economy functioning. The universe does not hate humanity. It simply views us as a highly profitable, easily exploitable biological resource. The true masters of the galaxy are not the ones sitting on golden thrones. They are the ones quietly tallying the ledger in the absolute dark. If you believe your secrets are safe because you have never spoken them aloud, you fundamentally misunderstand the nature of the vault. In the grim darkness of the far future, your mind is not a sanctuary. It is an open ledger. And there are ancient things in the dark that are very, very good at accounting. Archive this truth if your mind still belongs to you. The most terrifying monsters do not want to consume your flesh. They simply want your passwords.